Bonjour. Bonjour. Hello. Thank you for joining us today. Merci d'être ici. I want to first recognize and congratulate the Chiefs of Ontario and the Anishinaabe Nation and so many other First Nations communities who've worked tirelessly to be the ones who are working to make the decisions for their own children. Leur leadership, leur détermination et leur résilience nous amènent où nous sommes aujourd'hui. Today represents a long-awaited and essential step towards a future where First Nations children and families in Ontario have fair, culturally grounded, and community-led services that they truly deserve. Today, the Canadian Human Rights Tribunal has issued a decision approving the Ontario Final Agreement to reform the First Nations Child and Family Services Program. What this means is that the Tribunal has officially endorsed an $8.5 billion agreement with Canada that will support the equitable, culturally grounded care that First Nations children and families have fought long and hard for and deserve. Le tribunal appuie officiellement l'entente de 8,5 milliards de dollars avec Canada. Cette entente va soutenir les services équitables, adaptés à la culture et dirigés par les communautés. This decision is truly more than something that is administrative. It is a response to years of advocacy and to the children and families in communities who know that they deserve the most. This marks a historical milestone for First Nations across Ontario as they take jurisdiction in designing and delivering services that reflect their values, traditions, and languages, and more importantly, strengthening the outcomes for First Nations children. I want to read today an excerpt of the CHRT decision that was rendered today. One of the most colonial, patriarchal, and harmful mindsets espoused by Canada was that the government knows best and that children should make the decisions for First Nations children. Canada is making a giant step to reverse that legacy with the OFA, and it does so in partnership with the First Nations of Ontario. This shift is truly welcomed by me both as the Minister of Indigenous Services Canada and also as a First Nations woman and mother. We are moving forward today and recognizing the work of community to take care, uplift, and protect their future members. Through this agreement, funding will support transfers to partners, First Nations representative services, post-majority support services, and prevention efforts. Nous allons de continuer ensemble dans un esprit de respect et de la confiance. We welcome this as an opportunity, and we want to ensure that the direction we undertake in working together is going to empower not only community, but also leadership. At the heart of this work every day is the drive to deliver better results for First Nations children, not just in numbers, but in ensuring that real lives are changed. Fewer children in care, fewer entering in care for the first time, shorter stays, more children reunited with their families, and ideally, no children in care. Because every child deserves to grow up loved, surrounded by culture, in their community, amongst those that they know and care for them. Les communautés ont démontré beaucoup de courage et de persévérance pour rendre cette entente possible. Leur leadership crée un avenir meilleur pour les enfants des Premières Nations. It is our continued work to implement this agreement, and this will be continued to be guided by their vision, their knowledge, and experience. The next step is truly where the work begins. I'm here to support and ensure that this process is to build on the progress that we see being made. While today is an important milestone, a moment in history, it is not the finish line. It is a commitment to continue this work with urgency, accountability, collaboration, and support for our partnership as we move forward. The vision put forward by Ontario Chiefs has been instrumental in shaping the proposed regional approach on a national basis, ensuring that self-determination and strong regional lenses guide long-term reform of child and family services. This includes truly moving away from a one-size-fits-all approach and working towards community-driven solutions that reflect the unique needs of First Nations children across this country. We know that when First Nations lead, outcomes improve. They know what is best, how to create care for their children. They want what's best for them, and it is our responsibility to deliver that together. Recently, we've been working with First Nations partners and regional organizations outside of Ontario to negotiate long-term regional agreements for First Nations child and family services programs across Canada. I want to thank those nations who've come forward. Today is an acknowledgement that we are on the right path. This work reflects the plan that we brought to the Canadian Human Rights Tribunal in December of 2025, a plan that is built around understanding every region has its own distinct realities, its own strengths, and its own ways of caring for children. We are approaching these negotiations with respect for those differences and keeping First Nations rights at the center. This is the first step in truly ending discrimination. 131 First Nations in Ontario out of the 133 have supported this agreement. This means that it is truly just shy of 25% of First Nations communities in Canada who are part of a long-term solution. I want to acknowledge that there still remains that work to be done, and we are committed to moving forward. Together, we will build on this strong foundation and make sure that First Nations children and families in Ontario have the fair, culturally grounded, and community-led services that they deserve, and our work will carry across this land. Because at the end of the day, this work is not only about ensuring First Nations children grow up safe, supported, and connected to their culture, but also surrounded by their community. Nous allons continuer de travailler pour assurer que chaque enfant des Premières Nations grandit dans sécurité, soutenu et entouré par sa communauté. This decision today is something that has truly made a reality for so many. I want to acknowledge the Chiefs of Ontario, all support, all technical staff, advisors, elders, community members who've come together to advise and create this process. I also want to acknowledge the work of my colleague, Honourable Minister Patty Hajdu, who is incremental in this process in moving things forward. It's a pleasure to be able to serve and continue working with First Nations in advancing this important decision. Miigwech, and thank you.
Thank you, merci. We'll now go to the question period, first in person, then on Zoom. If you're on Zoom, you can use the raise hand function at this time, and I'll hand you over the mic. After questions in person, première question, Alexandra Anger, Radio-Canada.
Oui, Gull-Masty. My first question to you, je vais la poser en français. Êtes-vous surprise du temps que ça a pris pour le tribunal de rendre sa décision? Donc, on parle d'un an, un petit peu plus d'un an. Est-ce que ça vous a étonné ce long délai? Est-ce que pour vous, c'est... J'aimerais vous entendre là-dessus.
En français ou en anglais?
En français. Ou en anglais d'abord, mais en tout cas, oui, en français.
Je pense que le travail qu'on fait, puis la décision du tribunal, est pas juste une qui est vraiment importante, mais doit être comme pris avec une assurance que c'est une décision que tout le monde autour de la table peut implémenter. C'est pas une décision qu'on pourrait faire avec de vitesse parce que c'est une décision qui touche la vie des enfants. Et c'est pour ça que moi, je pense que la manière qu'on fait notre travail, ça doit être basé dans une réalité de comprendre que les décisions prises touchent les vies des enfants. Puis moi, je veux assurer qu'on a un processus en place qui reflète ça, mais aussi respecte ça.
Est-ce que je peux aller avec une deuxième question? Oui. C'est pas un suivi, donc est-ce que je je pense.
Normalement, c'est une question de suivi. Donc, on verra après la
Oui,
conférence
merci.
de presse si tu as le temps d'en poser une autre. Est-ce que tu as un suivi?
Non, ça.
We'll go to Sarah Ricci, Canadian Press.
Hi, Minister. Just want to understand why you are here in Ottawa this afternoon while Chiefs are simultaneously holding an event in Toronto. Were you invited to participate with them?
I actually was. I was. And, I had the opportunity last week to be at the Assembly with Nan. And I am of the view that we must respect the space that First Nations are taking when they're acknowledging the work that they do. I am here to uplift them. I am here to acknowledge that they have been able to bring forward something for their members. I've made that clear. I've had conversations with both Regional Chief Abraham Benedict and Grand Chief Fiddler, as well as a number of chiefs. So while I may not be with them in spirit in Ontario, they know and understand that I am walking by their side today and really acknowledging what they've been able to bring forward for their members. Excuse me. But it is their work to celebrate with their members, and they are going to take the space that they need to do that. But I'm here to echo the strength that they have.
And just as a follow-up, you talked a lot today about the work that lies ahead. Will your government be working to speed up that process now that this agreement has been finalized?
I don't think that should be one of the measuring sticks for the work that we do. Every decision that we take has an impact on a child's life. We want to be ambitious in our work. We want to be sure that we're taking the right decision. For me, that really means ensuring that we're there to build capacity with First Nations leadership, ensure that it's grounded in who they are, respecting, what kind of cultural components they want to incorporate. We will take the time that we need to do this work. But today, I think, is really an acknowledgement that everybody is on the right path in serving these kids.
Next up, Marco Vigliotti, iPolitics.
Thanks, Minister. I have questions about another topic. On S2, it appears that this government is requesting, or is in the process of requesting, an extension to the court deadline that prompted its introduction. I know there seems to be some disagreement in terms of the changes made in the Senate and the second generation cutoff. All the other opposition parties are in favor of them. Of course, you and your government have suggested there needs to be further consultation. I just wonder if this extension is granted and the government has more time than the end of the next month to pass S2, is it safe to say that those changes made in the Senate and the second generation cutoff will be removed from the bill?
Thank you. Thanks for the question. Second generation cutoff and the S2 is a very, very interesting place to be in as a minister, I'll say. I want to acknowledge the work of the Senate in really bringing this forward as a topic. And I think that, the methodology that they've incorporated in doing their work is one that I want to respect. They've put a lot of effort into this. But I also want to acknowledge that, during the process of receiving these amendments, I've also met with some First Nations that do not wish to have that applied to them. And as a minister, I am trying to find the common ground between the two of respecting those First Nations who wish to have a one-parent rule and respecting those First Nations who wish to have their own process and determine it amongst their members. I'm there to work with all communities who have an interest to define what that is for them. The complexities of how legislation is made is one that I'm learning. I'm open to anybody who has a suggestion from First Nations if they wish to express something outside of one-parent rule. And I want to be very clear. I hope that you'll quote me on this. I do support those communities who want to have a one-parent rule put in place. The reality of what the Indian Act was in 1985 is one that I understand. It affected my family greatly. And I know that what we accept as the 1985 version of the Indian Act is something that some communities are comfortable to work with. But I also believe that we need to do more. We need to challenge ourselves. And the decision that we see today, communities are able to make those decisions for themselves. I'm here to uplift them in that space and honor them with the tools that they need to do that. The collaborative consultation process was one of the first things that I expedited when I became minister. I had been very clear that we needed to do a standalone legislation. I've been on record as a minister, some of my first interviews. We're working with community to bring a solution forward that's going to help everybody and respect everybody, because we are all unique, distinct nations in this country, and I think that's something that we have to reflect in our decision making.
Thank you. About that standalone legislation, one of my colleagues alerted me last week that you told the conference, I believe, that the goal or the timeline for that separate legislation would be 2027. Is that accurate? Is that the kind of timeline you're working with right now?
I won't give timelines. It's for me, I'm trying to ensure that I'm respecting those communities that have expressed to me that they want to have something done. We have already received a number of details in the reports that were submitted for the collaborative consultation process. I'm having a reflection, and I'm hoping to bring forward, what I intend to do as a minister very shortly.
Thank you, merci. We'll now go on Zoom. If you're attending on Zoom, please use the raise hand function at this time. In the meanwhile, first off, Alessia Passafiume, the Canadian Press.
Hi, Minister. Alessia here. 3 house fires in 1 week have resulted in a toddler dying and 3 families losing their homes in KI. They say your department is failing to provide them with adequate funding for fire prevention and response, and that more families will be harmed until something changes. Have you spoke with Chief Donnie Morris or other reports due to the events of this week?
Maybe just repeat.
You cut in the second half of your question, Alessia. Could you repeat just the ending?
Oh, yeah. The communities from the Independent First Nations Alliance are saying that more families will be harmed until something changes. Have you spoken with Chief Donnie Morris, who lost his grandson this week, or other members of the Independent First Nations Alliance to offer supports?
Thank you for that question, Alicia. I think, you and I both understand that culturally it's important to be able to speak to those who have lost a loved one. I've reached out to the chief on a number of occasions. I am not pressing him to respond to me. Him and his family have gone through something that is quite significant. So I'm looking to hear back from him and his community to be able to have that conversation. I want to express my condolences to those members that have been really impacted by this. This is something truly tragic. I know for us to move forward, it really does take those conversations, and I want to be mindful of the statements that I make today in respect of giving the community the time that they need to be able to, address the loss that they've undertaken. And I'm looking forward to engaging with them.
I understand not wanting to speak about it directly right now, but while we're settling part of one CHRT case today, those First Nations launched another complaint about fire services in their communities. Why make First Nations go through all of this trouble of getting the Canadian Human Rights Tribunal to agree with them that your department is underfunding services rather than working with communities to fund their services adequately now?
Mm-hmm. Thank you for the question, Alicia. I am aware that there was a complaint that was submitted. I won't speak to the details of that. Like I said, I am not going to be speaking publicly on this file until I've had the opportunity to really, show my respect to the community and the loss that they have encountered. I know that, we will have a follow-up conversation on where this file is at, but I want to acknowledge, the life that was lost, the lives that are lost in communities in this instance. It's really important. Cultural protocol dictates that you have that moment to speak with them before making any public statements, and I'm going to respect that.
Next in line, Stuart Benson, The Hill Times. You're still mute, Stuart.
Oh, there we go. Okay, thank you. Sorry. Yes, sir. Stuart Benson, Hill Times. So this is sort of a scheduling thing. It's an off week when this tribunal came in. But I just, to compare this announcement and the announcement Carney is doing in Toronto, I just, looking back on the year, we didn't get a great, off to the best foot. I think some people would say for this government towards First Nations, Indigenous issues. Do you believe that, from where we are to now, we're just a little bit over 1 year in for Carney's first government. Do you think that there's been progress here? And what do you say to critics who believe that these files have sort of, they're not as much of a priority, especially with some of the funding for significant programs like the First Nation child welfare programs and Inuit First, Jordan's Principle and the Inuit First program. Those are sort of coming in last minute. What do you say to people who say that this is kind of starting to feel like less of a priority for your government? Sorry, that's a lot there.
Thank you for the question. I have to say that I don't feel that way. I've been working with a prime minister and a cabinet that have really indicated to me that protecting First Nations and where they are is something that's reflected in decision making. We have maintained our position to be able to offer those decisions. While the decision-making cycle is different than, I guess, other organizations or, the pace that people are normally used to, we are delivering the information that is also incorporating what is shared with us by partners. We're not unilaterally making a decision. We're taking the input that we receive. We are not only taking it into consideration, but ensuring that we're reflecting how we're going to look to that advice and carrying it out in implementation. And I think that this government has made a lot of progress. I think they have made a lot of decisions that are unique. I'm proud to work with a prime minister who has taken the decision to have Indigenous members in cabinet, to ensure that their voices are reflected, to ensure that the decisions that are made in all files have that component of reflection for the Indigenous reality. And, progress in 12 months is the pace of government, which I think is different than other spaces, but I'm really encouraged by it. I'm encouraged by it because I see people coming to the table, having conversations. I have to acknowledge that history of the relationship that people have with Canada. Being a representative of that, of Canada can sometimes be challenging, but we are moving into a new space. And the pace at which we do this work and have trust is really going to be determined by the strength in that space. And I look and trust to my colleagues, both Indigenous and non-Indigenous, to be respectful of that.
Follow-up, Stuart?
No,
Thank you. Next up, Melissa Ridgen, Global News.
Sanjay, hi, Minister. My question is regarding the Procurement Ombuds report last week. It slammed Indigenous Services Canada for its long-term handling of the procurement strategy for Indigenous business, calling it a shocking, cascading failure. What's your response to the report as Minister?
I'm going to be very honest. I'm still in the process of being briefed and reviewing the procurement, but I can speak on procurement on a higher level. We do need to ensure that in offering the opportunity to Indigenous groups to be a part of this process and protocol has to reflect in ensuring that, they are aligned with that next step. And I think that can be really challenging. And sometimes that space to ask questions can be one that is not always clear. And for me, I want to be sure that, in my conversations that I've had with Indigenous communities and organizations, that we are able to have a very frank and transparent conversation, and that will be reflected in the decisions that we make in addressing what we have seen, not only in this report, but also the next steps that we wish to take within the ministry itself. Thank you.
Follow-up, Melissa?
Do you have an idea of what the next steps are going to be? What for you and what you're telling the department you'd like to see in?
That first step is where I'm at in the space of working with, those Indigenous organizations, communities, entrepreneurs. There's a lot of advisory that we have received. I've been having this conversation for a number of months. We know that, procurement is an opportunity for Indigenous groups to come forward. We have to be sure when creating that opportunity that we're also building capacity, that we're creating very clear parameters that allow for those who wish to come forward and be in this space to truly ensure that we are, building their capacity as an organization, building their capacity as an entrepreneur, if it's an individual person, but also that it is very clear and how they are aligning themselves with that next step in being able to continue in this space. For me, procurement is, a baseline, and what we have said as a government, there's so much work to do, but clearly, there needs to be a bit of reform in this space, and we want to be sure that we do that work properly. So engaging with communities and being sure that we get direction and advice from our partners and, individuals that we work with is really important to me. I'm not somebody who feels that we have to rush work. We want work to be, quality and a good reflection of what people are looking for in the next step. And that means that we're working with communities at the pace that they see fit.
Thank you. I don't see any hands. Alexandra, je me demandais si tu avais une autre question. Vas-y.
Maintenant que l'entente a été approuvée par le tribunal, vous avez dit dans votre message tout à l'heure que vous avez hâte de vous entendre avec les autres Premières Nations. Donc, je veux savoir comment le travail avance de ce côté-là. Est-ce qu'il y a des discussions qui progressent bien? Est-ce que vous êtes confiante d'en venir à bout? Parce que là, on parle de l'Ontario, mais il reste beaucoup de travail à faire.
Oui. On a une équipe formidable qui comprend le dossier. Je pense que ce processus avec Ontario a vraiment établi un pathway pour avancer. Mais comme j'ai dit, je suis vraiment un ministre qui veut donner de respect à chaque nation. Ils sont eux-mêmes leur nation avec un processus qui est vraiment basé dans leur langue, leur culture, leur identité. Et j'ai beaucoup de nations qui viennent à la table pour savoir, pour nous, s'il y aura une entente, ça ressemble à quoi? Puis, je suis vraiment dans le moment de dire, si vous avez un intérêt pour explorer, on est là pour vous donner un avis. If there are some nations who wish to explore what it would mean for them, we're open to that. On a d'autres nations qui sont avancées dans le processus, puis ont demandé de faire les négociations avancées plus rapidement. Mais aussi, il y a des nations qui ont comme juste des questions. Puis on est ouvert à tout le monde pour donner des réponses, mais je suis vraiment content de la manière que ça progresse. I'm really happy with the pace at which things are going. We've had some nations come to the table and we're really seeing the advancements of their positions everywhere across the country. So I think that, when we come back and report on where we are at officially, there'll be a lot of encouragement. And today, the decision that was taken is a signal that we're on the right path. It's acknowledging, work that's driven by First Nations. I'm going to continue to uplift that. And if there are those First Nations regions who want to come forward and have that conversation, we're here to answer your questions. We're here to give you the information that you need to make a decision in terms of where you want to go and how you want to serve the children of your nation.
Allez-vous avoir des bonnes nouvelles et du nouveau dans ce dossier-là dans les prochains mois, dans la prochaine année? Êtes-vous confiante de dire que vous allez soit vous entendre avec le groupe de Cindy Blackstock ou d'autres nations du pays d'ici la fin de l'année 2026?
Bien, pour moi, mon focus est vraiment basé avec les nations. On avance des dossiers. Oui, je pense qu'on va avoir des bonnes nouvelles. Je donne pas de date parce que je suis vraiment quelqu'un qui veut travailler avec les communautés dans la manière qu'eux, ils vont avancer leur dossier. Puis, en tout respect, je veux dire que, Dr. Blackstock puis son équipe ont vraiment fait un grand travail dans ce dossier. On a tout le même but autour de la table. C'est vraiment d'assurer que les enfants sont bien gardés, sont fiers de qui ils sont comme des personnes autochtones, mais aussi sont entourés dans leur communauté par le monde qui aime et adore et veut les garder en soin et de les protéger. Tout le même but, processus unique, mais un programme de travail important pour tout le monde ici.
Alessia, I see you put your hands back up. I believe we have time for one last question.
Perfect. I hope you guys can hear me a little bit better now. But Minister, just about the NAN conference last week, during the Q&A period, you gave a lengthy answer about how you envision working with communities. And my read of one part of that was that when communities are speaking to folks in the room like myself and complaining about the slowness or however they view the department, that it doesn't make your job easier when you're trying to advocate on their behalf in front of cabinet. Can you kind of walk me through what you meant by that and kind of explain your position there?
That is such a lovely question, speaking to a room full of media. You know, I think that there's a relationship between First Nations, between media, between government, and I always encourage, those individuals that I work with, if you like the work that we are doing, please make those statements. It reaches the upper echelons of government. If you are frustrated with that work, feel free to express those statements as well. But I always think that good progress and confidence in a pathway forward is best reflected by collaboration. I spoke at length about collaboration, and I spoke a lot about change and what it means to be an Indigenous minister in this role, how I'm here to support community. I'm here to help you build community. I'm here to offer you the tools that you need to build that capacity. And for me to do that, I really want to have a good working relationship moving forward and being, as transparent and accountable as I can be to the people who come to Indigenous Services Canada, and to be, honest. I will say what I can do. I will say what I can't do. Sometimes you will be pleased with that. Sometimes you will not. But at the end of the day, my commitment is to work with you.
Merci. Thank you. That puts an end to this press conference. Thank you very much, Minister.
Thank you.